Matt, are you there? I see that his name's there. Okay.
Yes, Matthew Clare is present.
Thank you. Mike Lauder.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Mike Lauder, yes?
Yes.
Yes, Matthew Clare is present.
Thank you. Mike Lauder. All right, I'm getting feedback coming through. We're having some feedback issues, I hope. Kevin MacLeod.
Here.
Okay. Darren Perry.
Here.
All right. Kristen Purdy.
Here.
Thank you, Kristen. And Casey Snyder.
Casey's here.
Okay. We have a quorum. I want to also recognize that we are joined by a number of DWR personnel who are participating live this evening, including those who provided presentations and are available to answer questions throughout the meeting. Those employees include Covey Jones, Big Game Coordinator, Chad Wilson, Private Lands and Public Wildlife Coordinator, Brad Crompton, Southeast Region Assistant Wildlife Manager, Darren DuBois, Game Mammals Program Coordinator, Stacy Coons, Administrative Rules Coordinator, Lindy Varney, Licensing Coordinator, Marty Bushman and Greg Hansen, Attorney General's Office, Jim Christensen, Northern Region Wildlife Manager, and Northern Region Wildlife Biologist Dave Smedley, Dave Rich, and Eric Anderson. Dave Beveridge, Northern Regional Lieutenant, Jody Anderson and Haley Smith, Regional Outreach Specialists, and Ben Nodowski, Northern Region Supervisor. A special thank you to the many who have worked hard to prepare for tonight's meeting. This forum wouldn't be possible without your efforts. And finally, and most important, I'd like to welcome the public who are tuning in this evening by watching the live broadcast on YouTube. In preparation for this online format, DWR posted each of tonight's presentations online. The public was able to view those presentations and submit their written comments for each of us for each of those items for 10 days. Due to the sheer volume of comments we received, we will not be able to read those into the record. We will do our best to summarize those public comments for you this evening. And all of those comments have been sent to the RAC members in their entirety for their review and consideration. We won't be able to accommodate additional public comments during tonight's meeting. The RAC members are welcome to address the specific concerns they received from the public or outlined in the written comments we all received. Let's see. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page, we will adhere to the following format for each of tonight's agenda items. I will announce the agenda item, and we will not listen to the presentation by the DWR personnel tonight. All RAC members have been asked to view the recorded presentations online prior to the meeting. The regional supervisor will then summarize the public comments received for the agenda item. I will call for questions for RAC members on the agenda item. After questions, I will call for RAC discussion, including any clarification or additional information RAC members may request from UDWR staff. Mike Lauder, our vice chair, and Mike Lauder, our vice chair, and Ben Nodowski, the Northern Regional Supervisor, will help me keep track of input and concerns. We will be sure to visit each for discussion, motions including a second followed by a roll call vote. We will repeat this process until we have addressed everyone's feedback. We will repeat the process for each of tonight's agenda items. This process was used during last night's meeting in the Central region, and it seemed to work very well. We are hopeful it will work well for us tonight as well. I ask that RAC members please respect one another's opinions and opportunities to speak this evening. If more than one of you are wishing to speak at once, please be patient while we call on you one at a time. Please also be sure to clearly communicate your questions or concerns so we can work through tonight's meeting efficiently, effectively, and respectfully. With those introductory and housekeeping items taken care of, let's get started by reviewing and approving tonight's agenda and the minutes from our December 4th meeting. Are there any questions regarding the agenda or minutes?
Justin, this is Ryan Braun.
Yes.
Just as it relates to the minutes, I've spent a lot of time thinking about some of the comments that I made there, and we had some discussion regarding the rule about so many bears in pursuit and what happens if I have my bears and I'm under the limit and you have, or rather dogs, and you have your dogs, and our dogs end up on the same animal at the same tree. And that puts our conservation officers in a position of having to make a judgment call in the field. I wanted to make sure that the record showed that my comments there were not doubting our conservation officers, that I have the utmost respect and admiration for our conservation officers, and make sure that my comments in that conversation were not misinterpreted as not appreciating our officers and not trusting them.
Okay, I can thank you for that clarification, and I'm sure most of them attending heard that, and so thank you for clarifying that. Are there any other questions? Okay, if none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda and minutes for tonight. Art.
This is Ryan Braun again, Justin. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
I will
This
second.
is Mike Lauder, Justin. I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a first and a
Hey.
second. Yes,
That needed to be for the agenda, not the minutes.
correct. It's for the agenda. I apologize. Yes.
May I please make an amendment to my motion then? I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda.
And I will amend my second to second that
Can we not do
motion.
both of them? Okay, so thank you. So we've got that same first and second, and now we'll entertain a motion to what? Approve the agenda. So that was for the minutes. A motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I'll make the motion, Justin. Mike Lauder will make the motion.
Ryan Braun will second.
Excuse me, who was the second? I couldn't hear very well.
Ryan Braun.
Ryan Braun.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's see. So we have a motion by Mike Lauder and a second by Ryan. Can we combine all these together and just do one for both, or do we need to do both? Okay, so let's start. I apologize. We'll start with we had a first by Ryan Braun. Or first a motion by Ryan Braun. Motion by Ryan to accept the minutes, and a second by Mike Lauder. All those in favor? Do we need to roll call on this, or can we? We'll need to do a roll call on this, and so I will start with Ryan Braun. He made the motion, so yes.
Ryan Braun is in favor of this, yes.
Paul Chase.
Yes.
David Earl, I don't believe is here. Christopher Holstrom.
David Earl's on. I'm in favor of it. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, David Earl did check in. Thank you,
Chris,
David, and he is in
yes,
favor. Chris Holstrom also yes.
yes.
Randy Hutchinson.
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Aaron Johnson,
Yes.
Matt Clark,
MacLeod votes yes.
Mike Lauder,
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod,
Yes.
Darren Perry,
Yes.
okay, and Kristen Purdy. Kristen,
Yes.
Casey Snyder. Okay, and Kristen
Casey
said
Snyder's yes.
Okay, thank you. So the minutes passed unanimously. Now, also, we had a motion by Mike Lauder to accept tonight's agenda and a second by Ryan Braun. We'll now take a vote on that. And we'll start. Ryan Braun,
Ryan Braun, yes.
Paul Chase,
Yes.
David Earl,
Yes.
Chris Hogstrom,
Yes.
Randy Hutchinson,
Yes.
Emily Jensko,
Yes.
Aaron Johnson,
Yes.
Matt Clark,
Yes.
Mike Lauder,
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod,
Yes.
Darren Perry,
Yes.
Kristen Purdy,
Yes.
and Casey Snyder.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. Tonight's agenda passes unanimously. We will now go over the Wildlife Board summary. And give me 1 second as I pull these minutes up to make sure I have them correctly. Okay, 1 second, board summary right there. Okay. So for December's Wildlife Board meeting, for the, let's see, we're in December's, correct. I apologize. I'm in the room with Ben at this time. I'm just clarifying a few things. So we're going to go through. Okay. We'll go through January's Wildlife Board meeting, and it goes as follows. On the black bear and cougar rule amendments, there was a motion that was to move to maintain unlimited resident pursuit permits as is and restrict non-resident permits to two pursuits per restricted unit and unlimited on the others, and institute a 16 dog limit statewide, the 8 dog limit in the summer pursuit, and 16 in the take permits. And that, let me make sure that passed unanimously. There's also a motion that to add an ethics course for the online bear orientation and institute an online pursuit ethics course prior to purchasing a permit. And this also passed unanimously. There was a motion made and it was tabled till later. I'll go over that. It was to move to increase the statewide recommended bear permits by 25% on all units except the Beaver, Boulder, Book Cliffs, Cache, and Chop Creek units, and permit numbers would increase by 50% for those units. And this was then tabled and moved for later in the meeting. We'll discuss that in a minute. Then there was another motion that what was table on? That motion was then withdrew and was revised. And the new motion was that we do nothing on the units that have 10 or less permits, increase permits by 25% on the Beaver, Chalk Creek, and both Book Cliff units, and increase permits by 10% on the remaining units. The board will also defer to the division to determine the permit distribution among the available seasons on units that have crowding issues, the La Salles and the San Juan. And this, that motion passed unanimously. We also had a motion that we moved to accept the balance of the Black Bear. After that, we had a motion to accept the balance of the Black Bear and Cougar amendments as presented, including the red line correction on the 8-dog limit for both the summer pursuit and restricted summer permit seasons. And that passed unanimously. On the wolf management plan, there was a motion to move and approve the wolf management plan as presented, and that passed unanimously. And then there was an action on the brine shrimp COR rule amendments. There was a motion that we accept the brine shrimp COR rule amendment as presented, and that also passed unanimously. And then the last action item was that on a special species variance request, and that motion was that to be approved, and it passed unanimously as well. That was to approve Mr. Elwood Longnecker's variance to request for Pacific white leg shrimp. It was a new brand of shrimp that they wanted to put in, and the division felt it was fine, and it passed unanimously. That is the update of January's Wildlife Board meeting. Is there any questions concerning that?
Mr. Chair, the Wildlife Board also met in December, and we haven't had a update for the Regional Advisory Council on that meeting as well. So we do have that summary of motions, RAC members. If anybody has questions for the December board meeting, we can answer them. Otherwise, we can continue on the agenda.
Any questions concerning December's Wildlife Board meeting? Okay. I hear none. We'll now hear from our regional, an update from our regional, DWR regional supervisor.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'll start my regional update by introducing myself. My name is Ben Nadolski. I'm the regional supervisor for the division's Northern Regional Office. This is my first RAC meeting as the regional supervisor. Not quite the forum I had anticipated for my first meeting, but here goes. Obviously, a lot of our operations here at the Division of Wildlife and in the Northern region are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We are still operating our front desk and we're keeping our office open, but with limited staffing. We have some field work still taking place, but some projects have been delayed or canceled to remain consistent with statewide directives related to the pandemic. We've been really busy here internally redirecting and coordinating staff duties and assignments to make sure we're operating in line with the governor's directives while also achieving efficiencies whenever possible. Most of our people are now working remotely, and we've been working on a number of things that we haven't been able to do, but have always wanted to get done and needed to be done. So we're spending our time wisely and making good use of it. For our conservation outreach section, Jason Bergen, the Central Region supervisor, stated last night that the DWR has canceled public events in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. That has certainly been the case here in the Northern region as well. So far, that's included two or swan viewing events at two waterfowl management areas, a turkey hunting clinic, and a fishing tournament. And just recently, the organizers for the Great Salt Lake Bird Festival announced that they've decided to follow suit as well. We have had some challenges providing projects for dedicated hunters to get their volunteer hours. That's something that we're hearing a lot from hunters. Most of the demand for projects here in the northern regions will pick up next month, though, as the snow melts and more needs arise. But for now, apparently my camera is not working. There we go. Okay. But for now, we've been reviewing projects on a case-by-case basis to review for consistency with social distancing and the governor and local health department directives. So we'll continue to work through that as those challenges arise in the next coming weeks. But we'll see what we can do to help everybody be successful in getting their hours the best we can. In our habitat section, due to the COVID-19 concerns, we had to move a helicopter-assisted survey for 12 sites in the Newfoundland Mountains to evaluate existing guzzlers and to install new guzzlers for bighorn sheep out in the Newfies. Because of the close proximity of passengers in the helicopter, we've had to change that into an on-foot survey. So we've got employees hiking into the Newfoundland Mountains, looking at existing guzzlers and evaluating sites for new ones. And so far, we've covered 5 of the 12, and we hope to get to them all while we're able. Those guzzlers will allow sheep to utilize more of the mountain range during the summer when there's a lack of water, concentrates them more toward the north end of the mountain range. Hopefully this will help increase the number of sheep we can hold on that mountain. And it's clear from our findings that that sheep prefer to use social distancing as well, I guess. The habitat and aquatics section completed a fish habitat project at Pineview Reservoir. They installed 56 artificial habitat structures that were built and deployed to create structure for young fish to avoid predation. Previous structures have been in place with very positive results at Pineview Reservoir, so we're real excited about this, and we thank the Forest Service for their help in accommodating that project and for the use of their boat ramp during the project. We'll be opening wildlife management areas that have been under seasonal closures for big game this coming Saturday. So that has been keeping some folks busy. Efforts continue in our habitat section as well on identifying specific wildlife mortality hotspots with the help of our partners at the Utah Department of Transportation as well. In the wildlife section, where we've already announced in other forums, but we're happy to announce tonight that we selected Jim Christensen as our new wildlife manager. He's on the call with us tonight. And with Jim in that seat, we've also selected David Smedley as the assistant wildlife manager on a 1-year career mobility assignment. Both of them are working hard and doing a great job in their new roles. You'll probably hear from both of them tonight. We've also advertised our vacant box elder biologist position that Jim vacated to become the manager. And we'll be conducting those interviews shortly. And we're confident that we're going to get another great biologist to add to the team there. I apologize if my camera's not working. I'm not sure why it's showing that it's working on my end. If you're not seeing me, my apologies. The wildlife section is also conducting sage grouse and sharp-tailed grouse let counts. We're getting a lot of help from other sections on that effort as well. They're working on spring deer classifications that are ongoing. For the most part, we've had great adult survival across the region. Collar data indicates around 90% survival. And we'll talk more about this here in a little while on the agenda. We are losing some fawns, but mainly on the cash unit. We did find out recently that survival in the last week or two dipped from 71% down to 48%. So we'll get to more on that item, but it's something we need to discuss tonight. Turkey hunts will soon be starting, so we're gearing up to have hunters afield. And for our Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Project in our waterfowl management areas, our waterfowl biologists at Salt Creek are managing spring runoff and water diversions each day. They've been working for weeks on a water diversion infrastructure project that will help them drain the Salt Creek main unit, help them remove built-up silt and build up several nesting islands in the WMA. Our biologists at Farmington Bay are working on a native vegetation reestablishment project at Teal Lake. They've been planning as well, our biologists on two Phragmite burn treatments as well, one at public shooting grounds and one at Willard Spur WMA, but both are currently on hold pending the pandemic. We'll keep our fingers crossed that we can get back to both of those though. And they are also working on parking improvements to the new Willard Spur WMA. Those are underway to improve public access. In our aquatics section, we were able to conduct walleye spawning at the Willard Bay Reservoir for about a week and a half before we had to cancel operations due to the COVID and our proximity concerns. But during that time, our biologists were able to collect about 210,000 eggs from walleye. The fish that hatch from those eggs will be raised as 2-inch fingerlings and then stopped back into Willard Bay late in the spring. Last week, we also introduced kokanee salmon to Lost Creek and Rockport reservoirs. The goal of that stocking is to increase kokanee fishing opportunities for anglers. We've been preparing these fisheries for those introductions for several years, so we're excited to have that completed as well. As of a couple of weeks ago, we've also had to postpone some community fishery stockings for the spring. Those fisheries were attracting large crowds, and so we are directing a lot of those fish to other waters. In our law enforcement section, Crystal Tucker was promoted to the AIS Sergeant. She'll do an excellent job in that role. Brock Thornley is most likely to assume that role as the corporal. Brock is currently our Weber Davis officer, and he'll remain in that position, but will take on that added AIS duty to round out his new promotion. Brooklyn Evans is a brand new recruit who is scheduled to replace Crystal Tucker here in the region. Brooklyn grew up in Utah and graduated with a degree in wildlife ecology and management from Utah State Eastern, and also has an associate's degree in criminal justice. She's a sergeant in the Utah Army National Guard and has served one deployment in Iraq where she was a door gunner on a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. We're really excited to have her aboard. She also received the Leadership Award while in post, which is awarded to the class's top candidate. So she's going to come to the division with a lot of experience and capabilities. We're real excited about that. Our officers are also really busy supporting our partners at Parks and Recreation, especially at Antelope Island. They're managing big crowds of people there. So our folks are helping to patrol the island while the parks works on working with county residents on governor's directives. We're getting a lot of trespass calls, both on private lands, but also on WMA. So our law enforcement officers are busy with that. They're responding to deadhead reports when they get them. They're helping out with grouse surveys. And they're preparing to gear up for our AS interdiction season. So that's quite a bit, but just shows that we're getting a lot done still, even though we are, everybody's kind of working in different capabilities with this pandemic happening, but we're doing our best to make sure as much things get done for everybody as we can. That's all I have for the regional update, Mr. Chair. And I'll work on my camera in the meantime.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. And yeah,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I tried to jump in when you asked the question or somebody asked a question about the December board meeting. I think it's important. I attended that meeting to represent our RAC and found it extremely frustrating. I thought there was a lot of work that went into the deer management plan. I think the division did a great job, and the group that convened, the committee that was put together, did a lot of really good work. And frankly, it came down in discussion in with the board, and there were certain members of the board that were even on the committee that showed very initially said they accepted it, thought it was great, but then just tore it apart. I just felt like the board didn't give the RAC, all the RACs approved. There was very little, I thought, consideration given to the RAC's opinion statewide by some members of the board in that regard, and some other items. But I just kind of thought that was important, that people understand maybe what happened at that meeting with that mule deer committee and their findings.
All right, thank you, Kevin. And I think I understand your frustrations, and I believe that notes were taken, and I'm sure your voice was just heard with that. So thank you for attending that also while I was out of town at that time. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I got my camera working. Thanks for the help, tech support in the background.
Oh, okay. So thank you for everyone's participation. And then just a reminder to always check the little mute button down on the bottom. So while anyone is speaking or anything's going on, that is on mute. So that way we don't get background noise. And then when you do want to talk, that you'll just unmute yourself. And that way we won't get some of the background chatter that we were experiencing a little bit ago.
Justin, could I have
yes.
a quick question for Ben?
Yes.
Yeah, Ben, I was wondering if you could give us any type of update on the Antelope Island sheep reintroduction.
Sure. Yeah, if for those who are aware, we had 20 females and 5 males that are all alive and most importantly still on Antelope Island. We did bring some sheep in from New Mexico. Pre-testing of those animals of hunter harvested sheep yielded favorable results with no microplasma detected in the samples. Through our disease sampling efforts at the time of capture 25 females, we were unfortunately informed upon arrival in Utah that 6 had tested positive for microplasma. I'm sure you've heard these updates. Those sheep were monitored and tested, and unfortunately, after being in the trailer with the infected sheep, all the sheep ended up being infected with microplasma and unable to be released onto the island. But those that we do have from Montana are doing really well. I'm told we have good 100% survival there on those animals.
Any recourse on those animals from New Mexico?
Recourse on
anything we can do? That had to be a lot of money.
It was a bit of money. It wasn't anything that was that anybody was excited about when we got back, but it wasn't anything that anybody did with any ill intent. So I think we got to kind of take our lumps and learn how we can continue on, and just be thankful we didn't end up with microplasma on the island, to be honest. But we had really gracious support from the folks that hosted us, and from the folks that in the tribal members that helped us with the capture. It was a really great experience. Otherwise, they've been nothing but gracious, and we wish no ill intent on them either. We're real thankful for the help that they gave us, and we're equally saddened by the news for sure. And although it's been a challenge for us to handle here, it's a bigger challenge for them to handle. So we're trying to be helpful in supporting them in their efforts as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, are there any plans to try to introduce any more to the island in the near future?
I think we'd love to if we had the opportunity. I'm not aware of any immediate opportunities right now, so I don't think we have any plans in the immediate future. But
Ben,
yeah,
Jace or I could speak to that as well.
Oh, that's right. We do have Jace. We do have Jace on the line. That's a good point. Thanks, Kobe.
Yeah. So it's really early. Conversations are early, but when Montana found out what had happened, they said that they would be willing to offer up more sheep. And so we're in discussions right now with Montana and Brendan and to see if we could augment that population and give even more of a shot on the arm next year.
Good, thank you.
Colby, do you mind? I think it's important that people recognize that, understand the involvement of, I know Jace did a lot of work with it, but also Brendan Burns and Kuya. I don't know if people realize, my understanding is that was 100% donated through Kuya Camel. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we're obviously very, very appreciative of our partners at Kuya, but yeah, they completely funded that transplant and organized it and came up with, with funding to make sure that it happened. So, and as we know, these things, they're not cheap. So super appreciative of all Kuya and Brandon did on that.
All right, thank you. I just wanted that plug to let people know, that they're definitely, trying to help out as a company. So we're grateful for them. All right, any other questions? From RAC
Justin, Paul
members?
Chase.
Yes.
Is there any way we can post public comments? I received a number of emails from people asking if there's a way. I'm glad we're not reading them all, as many as there are, but there's an interest in the public seeing what other people are asking and commenting on.
So, yes, I also received a few of those requests. I believe it's something that we'll look into. With the comments that we received, there was no restriction put on them. Obviously, some of them would take much longer than the normal 2 to 3 minutes that they would get. I think that it's something that I would hope that the division would look and try to find a way to maybe allow some of those comments to be shared. I know one of the good things about the RAC meeting is you could go and then maybe hear a different perspective on another sportsman while they were there. But what that does now do is us as RAC members right now that we did have the opportunity to read and see those comments, I would invite our RAC members to recall some of those comments, any of those that you received that maybe sparked interest with you that you might be able to share them, on their behalf while we're here. So with the plan that we've got right now and information that we have, that'll be the only way that other comments will be heard is by members of the RAC sharing them. If you do choose to do that, I would hope that we would, try to maybe lump them into a spot where many of them were very similar. So we could, some of the, if you felt you could share some of those remarks as we get to those as they pertain to each of the agenda items. And hopefully maybe if we do this on the next one, we'll see if we can't, we're all learning right here.
If I could add to that, Mr. Chair. Paul, I think we could all agree we're in new territory for all of us here. This is our first round on the RAC doing this process. We had a lot of people worked really hard to try and get the best practices we could, and we're learning some lessons along the way for sure. And we're gonna have to make sure that we debrief after each meeting, but also after this whole round, before the board and after the board and so on. See what worked and what didn't, what we can do better moving forward. So we'll definitely be having conversations about these things as we move forward. But at this point, it'd be really hard for us to read all of those items into the record live. It would take, I think I might have 100 pages of comments here. They're really robust and in depth. It would take a long time for us to read them. So.
No, I agree with that. I'm glad we're not reading them.
Yeah, but that's something we're gonna have to we'll have to talk about as we move forward though. Thanks, Paul.
Right. I think, and that's a good reminder that we go through make sure as people take the time to send those comments, that we also as RAC members take the time to go through each individual comment and read them and have them help them with our decisions as we vote, that we take those into consideration. We'll now, without any other questions, we will now go to our agenda item number 5, the Bucks, Bowls, and Once in a Lifetime recommendations for 2020. Hoping that everyone had the opportunity to view the presentation by Kobe Jones, our big game coordinator and regional wildlife manager. Is there, do we have any questions for Kobe on any of these items at this time? What's that?
Mr. Chair, do you want to do the public input on that item?
Oh, sorry, I didn't follow procedure already. Yes, we'll first hear from our public input, and then we'll go to questions from the RAC members. Sorry. No
problem. Like I said, we're all in new territory here. So looking at the summary of the feedback that we got here in the northern region, we got 54.17%. So over half of the respondents support the proposal. Just under 17% were neutral, and just over 29% oppose the proposal.
So I'm in the same room as Ben. We are more than 6 feet apart. We're definitely social distancing. Same with Jim Christensen. So I'm pausing because hopefully the feedback isn't coming between our microphones as we're trying to talk together. So now at this time, I'd like to ask the RAC if they have any questions for Kobe, if they would this time, please ask them.
Chair?
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod, I read through the recommendations from SFW. And before I say that, I felt like comments, negative comments, or those that didn't approve of the plan were pretty much split between we're not giving enough permits versus we need to take more permits away and work on the herd. With that said, there are some recommendations that SFW has given, and one was a further reduction of deer permits for the cache unit. They're asking for an additional 800 permits to be cut on the cache. I hunt the cache, and frankly, I agree. I have property up on the cache and see the fawn kill and the survival rate. So my question to Kobe would be, the additional 800 permits, is that biologically a good idea? And get some input from those biologists on that.
Okay, I'll take this for a second, but I do want to note that we have David Smedley online as well, and he's the district biologist up there. And so make sure that he'll fill in anything that I miss. But what happened on the cache, I think that the original recommendation was perfect, as we were kind of going to come right into the recommendation. But over the last 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, we really saw a lot of fawn mortality. And if Justin, if you're okay with this for just a second, I would like to bring up a sheet that shows the RAC what we did to make big game recommendations this year. Because as I mentioned before, this plan allows us to take into account more than just buck-doe ratios. It allows us to take into account fawn and adult survival. Are you okay if I bring up that sheet and just show a few units? And
Yes, please do. I think that'll help inform us to make a better decision.
Okay, perfect. I'll get that up right now. Sorry, I'm new to this too. And present now, entire screen, this screen. All right, let me know when that's up for everybody. Can everybody see that?
Yes, I can see it.
You can see it. Justin, can you see it?
I'm not seeing it.
I can.
Should I
I see it,
try?
Toby.
Can't seize it.
Go ahead and proceed if you.
Okay, I'll proceed. Since the cache is up, let's bring the cache up and show a little bit about what happened on the cache.
Oh, I got it now.
Okay, perfect. We'll zoom this in a little bit. Okay, so if you look at the very top there, you've got your bucks per 100 does, right? Your buck-doe ratios. You can see 2015, a great year. 2016, we're offering a lot of permits, 7,100 permits at that time on the cache in 2016. The last 3 years, 17, 18, and 19, buck-doe ratios fluctuated a bit, down in 17, up in 18, and then in 19 back down again, but for a 3-year average of 16. Again, in 19, we were just out of the range at 14.3. Now, if we look at these systems, they're highly driven by two things. General season units are driven by, well, obviously the number of deer you have on the landscape, but then after that, the fawn-doe ratios are those yearling bucks coming into the unit and survival of those fawns. So we go out when we call our fawns. I'm not talking about the neonate study we're doing on the cache. I'm talking about the fawns that we collar at 6 months. right? 6 months to 18 months. And those are your yearling, your yearling deer. Last fall, when we surveyed at 54.7, 55 fawns per 100 does, which is a little lower than we'd like to see it, but it's not bad. And so we came in at a good thing there. Now, some of this data, I don't want to confuse anybody. I want to make sure everybody understands. But the next line here is the population estimate. And remember, that population estimate is always looking back on what happened from December of 2018 through December of 2019. And as you can see, we lost a lot of deer on the cache. We lost a lot of deer on the cache. That shows up here in our adult survival for that year, 0.67, and our fawn survival pretty horrendous at 0.06. All right. So then we took into account, or we looked at the permits we've issued historically, our harvest success or percent harvest, and percent permits filled. So on the cache, over the last 5 years, the average, you have this low year, a couple low years, bringing it down a bit. But on average, you're at about 22% harvest success. Your 5-year low, 15.6, and your 5-year high, 27%. And you can see how lows and highs correspond to those buck-doe ratios. So if you look here, 24%, very high buck-doe ratio that year on the landscape. So the more bucks you have on the landscape directly corresponds with your success. So this is where we ask the biologists to take a look at their body condition, how fat were their does, how big were their fawns, and try to predict survival. And I would say, over 90% of the time, their survivor curves are very predictable, and we're doing this right. We're good at it, but it's not perfect. So if we look at the cache, we're predicting high survival this year. These does came in really fat and really good shape. So you have to remember, this data of poor survival is looking back. Now we're predicting and looking forward. So 0.86. West-wide average is 0.85. That's slightly above average. We should hit that. We should hit that. Now, fawn survival, we were predicting, can't correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but we were predicting, I believe, 70% fawn survival based on the weights. Is that correct, Ken?
65.
65%, which is not unreasonable. I mean, we've seen fawn survival on the cache in the last 5 years as high as 80%, 0.79, and 60 just 2 years ago. So 65, not unreasonable. But we lost a lot of fawns in this last 3 weeks. We're down at 48% survival right now for fawn survival. And that number, when that number changes, it really affects, again, the number of bucks on the landscape for that yearling, that harvest. So this is the revised recommendation. So the recommendation before was 5,800, showing the RAC what it would look like if that were at 5,000. 1,000 between low and average success, you'd come right into your buck-doe ratio. And so taking all this data into account, we're trying to be more proactive in our recommendations. Before, we always had to look back on last year. And now we're trying to look forward and project and just be more proactive. Now, again, we're going to readjust next year, and we might not always hit this, but this is the method we've chosen to use in the new plan. Just to add one more thing while we're doing this really quick, and that is that these cuts are aggressive. This is the most aggressive that the Division of Wildlife has ever been on cutting permits. And I want the RAC to understand that when times are good and we're growing deer and we're in growth mode and things are good in the landscape, you're going to see increases that are just as aggressive. And some of these units, we've looked at this and we've really cut permits where we've needed to. And so just expect and hopefully support when we come to you and say, no, things are good right now. We have the ability to increase permits. We hope to receive that support then as well. And that's what we have there. Are there any more questions on that? I think in short, what I would say is that with the additional fawn mortality, we could support an additional reduction on the cache.
Kobe, what's the habitat like up there?
I'm going to turn that one over to Dave. But I believe, in my personal opinion, the cache can hold more deer than it currently has on it right now. It has the ability to have more deer than it has right now. Dave, if either of you would like to speak to anything or anything that I missed.
So I'll add into that. I think you're right, Covey, especially on the summer range. I think the cache is really winter limited. They don't have the winter range that they used to. But I agree. I think we can, with what habitat we have currently available, we can support more deer than what we've currently got. And then, you know, it's hard when some of those hard winters, like you just saw, we lost a lot of deer, as Covey showed on that, which can happen on some of those hard winters.
This is Jim Christensen. I would also like to add on the cache that we've been doing a lot of habitat work up there in coordination with the Forest Service and with our own habitat crew. We've been doing a lot of good work up there trying to increase that capacity of those deer too and improve what they do have habitat wise.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Chair, just a small question. So Kobe said that an additional cut could be supported, and probably not a bad idea. Maybe not 800, but just for the RAC consideration. You know, there's people scream when you take opportunity away, but I liked what Kobe said, and I think they've done a lot of good work to be able to give some good data, and that when population's doing hunters as well.
All right, thank you. Just so RAC members know, I've just made a note as far as the cache deer unit and some questions that we had. What I'd like to do is, as we continue to ask questions on particular units or species, I'll be making some notes, and then when we feel that we're time that we'd like to make motions, we can maybe perhaps discuss some of these unit by unit based or dissect it a little bit. So I've made some notes, Kevin, on that right now, and as we get further on, when it comes time to make a motion, maybe we'll entertain doing something with the cache unit. Okay. Do we have any other questions concerning any of the other part of Kobe's presentation? One that I had was considering, you know, I received some, both from I believe the Wild Sheep Foundation, SFW, and a few other sheep hunters. There's some significant changes to the amount of sheep that have been added, the tags that have been added, and there was a lot of concern for some sportsmen that we may be adding too many. Trying to see if I can remember the exact unit, but Kobe, maybe you might address that or know to which units that the sportsmen have been concerned about.
Justin, this is Randy Hutchison. I actually have, that was one of the things I was going to bring up, and a very specific one. I hope I have this right, Colby. From your presentation, I believe you said on the Stansbury unit that you're increasing permits there to try to prevent the sheep from wandering off, if I remember correctly. Now, correct me on this. So I am getting this information secondhand from the Sheep Foundation. But I think that the unit has been getting supplemented with additional sheep coming on, and I think it's currently under objective. So that seems to be, I'm a little confused on, if we're under objective, why are we worried about the sheep going off? And if we are worried about that, is our objective wrong?
I can speak to that a bit. There's two parts there. You know, one is the overall population objective, which obviously we don't want to have more sheep on a mountain than what it will sustain, and that does concern us about sheep wandering. But the other part of that is even if you have the appropriate number of sheep or less than the appropriate number of sheep, and you end up with high male to female ratios or high ram to ewe ratios, young rams will still wander, looking for a chance to breed. And so in areas where we have more concern, we are a little bit less restrictive or a little bit more liberal on our permits, because if we can keep those ram to ewe ratios lower, there's more of a chance that the males will stay on the mountain. And so, and it happens every November. Every November, when we watch a unit that has high ram to ewe ratios, especially, we get a bunch of calls of, hey, I saw a bighorn in my backyard, or hey, I saw a bighorn here. Regardless of where we are in terms of the population objective, it's just not wise to run some of these units at high ram to ewe ratios. Jace, would you add anything to that?
No, nothing that I'd really add. Maybe some numbers that might help with the question. So the population objective for the Stansbury Mountains is 500 bighorn sheep. We currently have only about just over 100. And that's because, if you remember, this herd was depopulated back in 2016 because of a catastrophic respiratory disease event. And so since 2018, we've had 4 translocations into the Stansburys to try to rebuild it. So we're just restarting the unit. It's going really well. The herd is growing. We're seeing lambs. Things are going really well. The translocations have been successful. And so I think that this time around, we're, like Kobe said, we're trying to be more liberal or aggressive with the permits to try to reduce the risk of wandering events from rams. So just like Kobe said.
Okay, so a quick follow-up question. This is for my understanding. So that being the case, are the additional animals that we're bringing in and putting there, are they mostly used?
Yeah, they're mostly used. So the last 2 translocations that we did, there was one this winter. So back in January, we brought 25 sheep from Oregon. 20 of those were females. The year before, we brought 20 sheep from Washington, and 16 of those were females. 2 of them were mature rams and 2 of them were young rams. Yeah, we are definitely, the translocations are definitely skewed towards females.
So are you the biologist for that herd?
No, I'm not. So the biologist, that's a central region district, and the biologist is Jason Robinson. I'm just out of the Salt Lake office. I'm the bighorn sheep coordinator, so I help all the different district biologists that have bighorn sheep and mountain goats, but just helping them coordinate. So kind of filling in for Jason since this isn't his RAC.
Okay, does Jason have any concerns about this unit with those increase in permits?
No, Jason made that recommendation. Jason is the one that recommended that we go to 5 permits. He would like to be liberal or aggressive with ram permits to try to reduce the risk of rams wandering. That's Jason's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Jace. And Randy, do we have any other questions about any of the other sheep units or any of the other numbers that have been presented to us?
Justin, I do.
Okay, yes, Kevin.
Another one that I looked at was the ewe hunt on the Newfoundland unit. And I'm at probably a little bit more advantage because I listened to and watched the presentation of the Central RAC last night. And they had the same concern. I would like Kobe to respond like he did last night on the rationale behind that ewe hunt and the support for it.
And I would love to. I just don't want to do it twice, just because we have that coming up in the Antlerless presentation as well. Is it okay, Kevin, if I hold off on that until the Antlerless presentation or you presentation?
You know what? I should have remembered that, Kobe. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kevin. I was just going to suggest that. Thanks, Kobe, for bringing that up. I'm not sure if our new this technology, or if we're shy or quiet. I'm not hearing a lot of comments. Any other concerns that have come up considering these numbers? All right. All right, do we have any, if there's no more questions, how about comments? Do we have any comments from the RAC concerning this agenda item?
This is Randy Hutchison. My only comment would be I am concerned about the cash unit, and I think it'd be appropriate to consider some reductions up there.
I also would agree with that, Randy. I think especially with it's wonderful that we have the information that we're getting and the hard work that's being done to help provide these numbers, how we know the mortality rate of fawns. And so since we have the science and the technology that's being put in place, I think that we should take advantage of the information that we have and use it. And I would agree that I believe that looking at the mortality rate of the fawns at this last 2 weeks, that it would be wise to lower those numbers, especially after our biologists also said that they believe that would be appropriate.
Can I ask one more thing? If the RAC chooses to go this direction, if what he feels like the appropriate number is to reduce that, just so that we're following the data, just to make sure if that's okay.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Thanks, Colby. Dave?
I think especially looking at that sheet and what we're projecting, I think 800 would be a very fitting number that we could definitely support to take down. I know it's a lot, but I think we could definitely support 800 more tags, a decrease, so a total of 5,000 permits instead of 5,800.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave, for that. So I think let's please consider that as we prepare to make some motions, that we might remember that. Any other comments from RAC members or any?
Dustin, this is Mike. I just want to make a comment in regards to the effort from the Division of Wildlife to be looking forward. Colby made mention that historically we've looked back and kind of been reactive. I really appreciate the proactive approach of looking forward to and making estimates on things to come, and I commend the division for making that effort.
And I want to make sure too that I don't make it sound like the people before us did it wrong, because it's a perfectly great way to do wildlife management. Much better data now, and the research program and the deer survival monitoring program, and a lot of that is thanks to the work that all the biologists across the state have put in, and Kent Hersey, the big game projects coordinator as well. So that's why we can do that now. 5 years ago, we didn't have the data or the ability to do that. So.
Do you have a comment, Matt?
I was just gonna, this is MacLeod. I was gonna make a motion that we accept the proposal as presented, with the exception that we reduce the cash deer quota by 800.
I would second that. This is Mike.
Okay, so give me 1 minute. So we had a motion by Matt Clark to accept the presentation as presented, with the exception of the cash deer unit, and we would cut the cash numbers by an additional, or decrease the numbers by additional 800. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we have a motion by Matt and a second by Mike Lauder. I'm having a brain lapse right here. Do we ask if there's any questions or any clarifications on that? Do we have any discussion on the motion? Any questions that we might have on that before we call for a vote? Okay, not having any. So what we will do is we will do a roll call just as we did with the minutes and the agenda. So I will go individually to each RAC member and I will ask for your vote, and please say yes or no at this time. And we'll begin with Ryan Brown.
This is Ryan Brown. I say yes.
Okay. Paul Chase.
Yes.
you. David Earl. David? All right. If David, if you are able to get back in, we'll hear your vote. Let's go to Christopher Hogstrom.
Yes.
Okay. Randy Hutchinson.
Yes.
All right. Emily Jensko.
Yes.
Aaron Johnson.
Yes.
Matt Clar.
Yes.
Mike Lauder.
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod.
Yes.
Darren Perry.
Yes.
Kristen Purdy. Are you there, Kristen? Not hearing anything. Maybe, I think on the phone, people calling in, there's a little bit of confusion on the mute button, perhaps. So she's still there?
She's still showing as being online, Chair. Maybe she's having trouble with mute. We'll check back with her and with David Earl at the end.
Okay. Casey Snyder. Casey, are you there? Appears we're having issues with those who are calling in. Are you seeing the same thing?
Hey, Justin.
Yes.
This
Yes,
is
there's
Kristen
Kristen.
Purdy.
Yes.
Let me give you a yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back. David Earl, were you able to? David? And then Casey Snyder, were you?
Casey Snyder is not able to unmute on his end. He says he's pushing *6, but he's a yes on this vote.
Perfect. Thank you, Casey. And hopefully we can get something figured out. And I wonder if that's not the same thing that's taking place with David this time. Needless to say, with how would I call this vote? I mean, at this time, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 12 yeses and one that has not can't come in. So I'd say the agenda, the motion passes. And then we will address again. Hopefully we can figure something out with and get our remaining vote in. Jody, is that sufficient for you at this time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We will now go to agenda item number 6, the Antlerless permit recommendations for 2020. Again, that hopefully everyone watched that presentation. It was also presented by Covey Jones, our big game coordinator and regional wildlife manager. This time we'll hear our public comment. If I can follow the rules right on what we got from public comment, we'll turn the time over to Ben.
You got it, Mr. Chair. It looks like public comment again. We had just over 54% in support of this proposal. Just under 17% opposed it, and just over 29% were neutral.
Okay, thank you very, very much. This time we'll go open some time up for questions for the, we actually have an item before we go into some questions that we'd like to address. As the Antlerless permit, as the recommendations come out, we found an issue with the boundaries on the, I have it right here. What boundary? Jim, will you just step in and just share with us what the issues that we had with the boundaries on this particular unit?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So despite our our best abilities to make sure we had everything right. We did unfortunately let one of our boundary changes slip through the cracks. I'm gonna try and pull that up for everybody to see where I'm talking about. It's gonna be for the East Canyon, Davis, North Salt Lake area. Give me 1 second here. Okay, if everybody can see that. So the area that is circled in red, the map as it is and as it was presented in the RAC packet is the current boundary for that hunt. This includes antlerless deer, antlerless elk, and antlerless moose. What we are proposing is to include all this area where my pointer is west of US 89. We'll go all the way down to I-15. So the boundary will be on the west end, I-15 down to I-84, and then up I-84 to the existing boundary. The reason behind this change is Hill Air Force Base has some open area on base where they are experiencing high numbers of deer. They're getting real close to the runway and potentially causing some problems with all the aircraft coming in and out of the base. So what the proposal would be to include that area west of I-89 down to I-84 or down to I-15, excuse me, so that we could include Hill Air Force Base in this boundary so that they can allow antlerless, mainly antlerless deer hunters in with these permits that are being proposed through and have been proposed for the last couple of years. If there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer anything.
Jim, we couldn't see your pointer, but I'm assuming you're talking about that triangular area to the left and north, west and north
Right.
of the current boundary. Okay.
Jim, just a quick question. If it's part of Hill Air Force Base, I guess they're going to make arrangements through, it would be just those that work on base that have that opportunity?
Right. So it would be anybody who currently has access to base. They would be able to go in there. Currently, that part or this area is included in the buck deer hunt boundary. It's in with the extended archery boundary. But like a lot of people, the hunters are selecting for the bucks on the area, and they need to control the population through some doe harvest. And so by allowing people to apply for the hunt that's in that greater East Canyon area, if they do currently have access to Hill, they would be able to use that permit on base. And we've been working with base, and this is one of the solutions we've been able to try and come up with.
All right, thank you. So is the F-35 a legal weapon to take and tell deer? No, sorry. Do we have any other questions concerning these boundaries? All right, how about questions concerning any of the other items that were presented in this, for this agenda item?
Justin, I think this is where Colby would give some comment on the
Yes. Do you have a question for him, or why don't you will you restate that question for him so that I help those who may have logged on later might want to know what it's about?
Yeah, the proposed U hunt on the Newfoundland for the sheep. There was some negative comments about that in comments that I read, and then SFW recommended that not happen, that we work on transporting them instead of killing them. And so Kobe had a really good presentation last night to answer that question, if he'd do the same tonight.
I would love to, but let's give Jim first crack at it, and then if he misses anything or if I miss anything, I'll fill in. It's Jim's region, and that used to be his district. So, Jim, do you want to take first crack at why we'd recommend to hunt out there instead of transplanting those animals?
Yeah, sure thing. So the main thing for recommending a U hunt out there is population control. Some of the comments last night were mainly directed to why not just transplant those sheep off of the island and take them somewhere else where populations need a little boost. So with the increased air traffic, with the F-35 program, that Newfoundland's mountain is all within restricted airspace. And so we have to get permission through the military in order to get out there and do any kind of flying in that restricted airspace. With the increased traffic, it's getting harder and harder to get access into the airspace. We have been able to do some transplants in the past out there, pre F-35, and even with that, we still had to schedule through the base. It's very time consuming to be able to coordinate and get a day or two that we can actually be out there doing our work. And if we run into weather delays or anything like that, then it just pushes the whole project back and leaves the project in limbo on whether we can even make that happen or not. Another reason why we're choosing to use U-hunts over transplants is just the risk factor associated with transplanting California bighorn sheep. We've done it before. Like I've already mentioned, for those previous transplants, we have seen a lot of sheep making initial forays off of the release site. Those sheep, it's all new to them. They are going to find a place to make a living, find the adequate resources that they need, and in so doing, they have the risk of going into an area where they can come into contact with some other animals that might be carrying mycoplasma, for example. And so we've already had some comments and conversation about like the Ochre Stansberry unit. Jason Robinson is recommending to increase some permits due to that same risk associated with these bighorn sheep. And so that's the second main reason we're looking at U-hunts to control the population. Third thing, and this is trivial, but it takes a lot of time to coordinate a transplant, a lot of money. We have done it before, but when trying to work around the flight restrictions, that can just add in some more time and possibility that if we run into a weather delay, we just can't even get that transplant to happen. Hopefully I answered that adequately.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's great too. Just one more point is that there's always risk when we transplant anything. There's risk to the animals we catch. There's risk to where we release. We don't have a lot of spots for Californias. You know, we only have the Stansberries, the Oak Creeks, the Newfies. And so with these units are doing well, there's really not a reason to be moving more sheep there.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Kevin, does that answer your question, or did that help you?
Yes, it does. Justin, appreciate that from those guys. And with that, I would make a motion that
Well,
we.
we're gonna have some questions and we still got some comments before we get quite there.
Oh,
So we're not,
Oh, okay.
but we'll get there. And we're taking some notes on these things. So thank you though.
You bet.
I also want to make note that due to some technical difficulties, David Earl has left the meeting for right now. We hope that he'll be able to get online, but and when he gets back on, we'll acknowledge and see if he was able to hear to vote appropriately. Are any other questions? I think at this time I'd invite the RAC to perhaps recall some of the comments that maybe you received in the online from our public, and I think it'd be appropriate if any of those that perhaps we'd share any of those if
yeah. Yeah,
one of these.
Justin, I have one real quick. I know when Ben was going over the summary of the public comments, I think he said it was 17% disagreed with the recommendations. Now this is going from memory because I've read a ton of public feedback forms. Almost every one of those that disagreed was because the numbers were too high on the permit numbers that were being given out, with very few exceptions from my memory. And the one area that I was curious about, Kobe, if you could maybe get some more insight. I don't know if your spreadsheet has this or not. And I know they're not huge numbers, but the box elder unit, it's had a few rough years as well. And I'll admit, I'm surprised. There's not huge numbers, but I believe that was 60 permits for box elder. Is there a need for 60 permits to be going out there?
Jim, do you want to tackle that one as to why we're issuing those permits?
Yep, I was just gonna say, Randy, I'll talk to that one. So the box elder antlerless permits, that hunt is situated in the Bear River Valley. Those deer are all on private lands and they cause depredation issues all year round. And so that hunt began long before I even started as a biologist in order to address those depredation issues. And so that's why we're continuing to recommend those permits.
Okay, so all 60 of those permits are just right there in the Bear River area then?
Correct.
Okay.
And if I could clear up just in general some concerns about antlerless permits, we looked hard this year and we cut almost half the doe tags statewide and said, okay, hard to only hunt deer where we have to. But we're also bound in statute to help alleviate the damage that private landowners get. If we have an opportunity to alleviate that damage and allow a hunter to do it, we would much rather or prefer that over doing a division removal. Situations where we have to go and do a division removal, address this with public hunters.
And I'll just chime in. I would completely agree. I did not catch that those doe permits are just in that along the river corridor there. Because if they're out west, I'd be more concerned.
Right. Thank you. So, Kobe, I know I've always been a bit advocate of the transplanting, and I know that right now is not. I wish we could find a way to do that in an area. I know we're concerned about. I mean, the biggest concern is I guess moving I almost said COVID-19, but the deer version of COVID-19 or the chronic wasting CWD. Is there where that's not an option right now along Highway 89 and through Perry, Brigham, and Willard? We hear a lot of stories of high mortality of deer being hit by cars, but then also a lot of depredation by the orchards and things that are there. Has there been any consideration into maybe working together with sportsman groups and possibly do fencing to first help protect some of the maybe going partners with also, you know, the landowners in the orchards and try to protect them with higher fencing so that we could maybe mitigate some of the crop damage and not have to have so many depredation tags that are issued through that area, especially, you know, Willard and Perry area.
Yeah, and again, I can speak in generalities to that, and that is we fence several orchards every year. So we look at where our highest depredation conflicts are every year. And every year the agency will spend upwards of $200,000 on fencing to partner with private landowners to help alleviate that damage. In those extreme depredation situations, look at that. We also work with UDOT highways and provide crossings where appropriate. So we'll continue to do that, but I'll let the region speak to the specifically in the Perry area and what we're doing there.
I can speak to that one again. So currently we are exploring fencing options internally in the DWR before we take it to sportsmen's groups. After looking at where damage claims are coming in for orchards, we do also recognize the high vehicle collisions with deer along Highway 89. What we're looking at as a more realistic option would be a fence above the homes, maybe around the canal, running from Sardine Canyon to the south. The problem that we're seeing now, or I guess it's not a problem, but the question now is where would we stop that fence? We could realistically run it all the way in to North Ogden. And so that's kind of where our discussions are at this point. We have started getting some maps put together as far as Willard, or maybe the domestic elk ranch in Willard could serve as that southern boundary. But regardless, that would need to be a long stretch of fence, pretty costly stretch of fence. But yeah, it is something that we are starting to do some ground or some base work on to be able to take to partners.
All right, thank you. Has it been successful? Has the fence worked in other places, you know, as far as to help with orchards and things? Does it seem to, are the landowners happy with the results, and have we been able to see it be successful in other parts of the state?
Hugely successful in other parts of the state. Yeah. I can think of several examples right now. We've installed fencings and crossings and fenced orchards where it's alleviated the damage and been better for everybody. And I'm sure it has been in the region too, right, Jim?
Yeah, the permanent fencing, that's always one of the requested options from landowners because it does work so well. We do have a fence over in Cache Valley running from Logan Canyon to Blacksmith Fork Canyon, which would be similar to running a big fence along the canal there through Perry and into Willard. As long as we can have residents respect the fence and not cut holes in it, because it does cramp some lifestyles, especially if they're used to going up and taking a walk on that canal road or something else. You put a fence up there and it disrupts the routine that they've been going through for a while. And so as long as we can keep the fence intact and the holes patched, it's very effective at keeping wildlife out.
Thank you. That's good information and good to know. Any other questions from RAC members this time, or any of our regional representatives or Kobe? All right, comments at this time. Do you have any questions? Do we have any comments from from RAC members concerning this agenda item? All right, there's no comments. This time Kevin was eager earlier, we'd entertain a motion on agenda item number 6.
Chair, I would make a motion that we accept the proposal for the Antlerless as presented.
This is Ryan. I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Kevin MacLeod to accept the presentation as presented. And we have a second by Ryan Braun. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Any questions about it? Okay, we'll now go to roll call as we've done in the previous agenda items, and I'll begin with Ryan Braun.
Ryan, yes.
Paul Chase.
Yes.
David Earl. Oh, is he back on? We noticed, is he back online yet? Okay. Chris Hogstrom.
Yes.
Thank you. Randy Hutchinson.
Yes.
Emily Jensko.
Yes.
Aaron Johnson.
Yes.
Matt Clark.
Yes.
Mike Lauder.
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod.
Yes.
Darren Perry.
Yes.
Kristen Purdy.
Yes.
Casey Snyder.
Mr. Chair, I got a message from Casey Snyder saying he's still having trouble with unmuting, but he is a yes on this item as well.
Okay. I'm going to take 1 second. I'm a little nervous. I have 10% on a battery, so I better get this going before we have a problem. So, excuse me. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you everyone for helping with that. We will now go to agenda item number 7, which is the CWMU rule amendments.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm getting a couple nudges in the online setting to take a quick restroom break.
Oh,
This would also be a good time for us to maybe make some updates on some technology, see if we can solve some of these glitches too, if that's okay.
perfect. So I have right now is 7:41. What do you want to say? 5 minutes? Or do you want to go 10?
10.
We'll go 10 minutes. So everyone will be back at 7. Let's go 7:50. Thank you. Waiting for anything or?
Mr. Chairman, the broadcast is resumed.
Okay, welcome everyone back. Hope no one carried their device into the restroom. I've seen some strange videos as of late of some mishaps with these type of meetings. So where we left off then is we were just about to start agenda item number 7, but I need to can I turn some time over to Jim, or how do we want to remind me? I'll go to Ben for just a minute. We have a clarification or something that we need to make sure we take care of.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Before we move on to item number 7, CWMU rule amendments, we wanted to make sure and double back on the conversation on the boundary proposal that Jim mentioned related to Halo Air Force Base and the Antlerless hunt.
All right, I'm having some.
Nothing. You having a hard time, Mr. Chair, with your tech?
Okay, I got the earpiece wasn't going back on, and so will you repeat what you said, please?
Yeah, I was just mentioning that we need to double back to the list permit recommendations and address the boundary recommendation that Jim Christensen discussed related to Halo Air Force Base and Antlerless hunt.
Okay, so what we'll need to do is I'd like to invite someone to make a motion, or if everyone was clear and okay with that boundary exception or change that we have on the, so I make sure I get the correct name of it, is what is the name of it again? The Davis?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim.
Yes.
The unit is East Canyon, Davis, North Salt Lake.
Okay, I'll make the recommendation that we accept the proposed boundary changes to the Davis, East Canyon, North Salt Lake unit, Antlerless unit.
I will second that. This is MacLeod.
Okay, so we have a motion by, it was Randy, correct? Randy Hutchinson?
Yes, yes.
And a second by Matt Clark to accept the boundary change. Do we have any discussion on that? If not, we'll go through the roll call vote now on that. We'll begin with Ryan Brown.
Ryan, yes.
Paul Chase.
Yes.
David Earl, I don't believe is going to be returning, so we won't abstain from this. Christopher Holmstrom. Randy Hutchinson.
Yes.
Emily Jensko.
Yes.
Aaron Johnson.
Yes.
Matt Clark.
Yes.
Mike Lauder.
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod.
Yes.
Darren Perry.
Yes.
Kristen Purdy.
Yes.
And Casey Snyder.
Yes.
Oh, you got it. Good. Okay, thank you. So that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We will now go to our next agenda item, item number 7, the CWMU rule amendments. That hopefully everyone had the opportunity to watch that. It was presented by Chad Wilson, Private Lands Public Wildlife Coordinator. Does anyone have any questions for Chad at this time?
Mr. Chair, do you want to do a public comment?
I'm sorry, I keep doing this. Yeah. We'll give the time to Ben to give the public input on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, we had just over 54% in support of the proposal, just over 4% in opposition, and just under 42% were neutral to the proposal.
Okay, Thank you. So with that, do we have any questions for Chad at this time? The rule amendments. Okay, do we have any questions or any comments on this?
And this is Matt. I propose that we accept this motion as presented.
All right, so we have a motion from Matt to accept the rule amendments on the CWMU as presented.
I'll second that. This is Randy.
And the second by Randy Hutchinson to accept the rule amendments as presented. Do we have any discussion at this time? Okay, we'll now go to a vote. So again, we'll go through roll call. We'll begin with Ryan Braun.
Ryan, yes.
Paul Chase.
Yes.
David Earl is not back. Christopher Holmstrom.
Yes.
Randy Hutchinson.
Yes.
Emily Jensko.
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Aaron Johnson.
Yes.
MacLeod. Mike Lauder.
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod.
Yes.
Darren Perry.
Yes.
Kristen Purdy.
Yes.
And Casey Snyder.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We will now go to our next action item. That is agenda item number 8, which is the CWMU Antlerless permit recommendations. This was also presented by Chad Wilson. Once again, I hope everyone had an opportunity to watch this. He's the private lands and public wildlife coordinator. We'll turn some time over to Ben and let him give, so we can hear what the public input was on this.
Okay, the public supported this proposal, just over 54%. We had just under 42% that were neutral and just over 4% that opposed.
Okay, with that information, do we have any questions for members of the RAC for Chad at this time? He's really wanting to have a chance to shine on the screen here and talk to everyone. No questions for him at all? Do we have any comments?
This is Matt Clark. I would propose that we accept this proposal as presented.
Okay, so we have a motion from Matt Clark to accept the what would you call it? Sorry, accept the presentation as presented. And do we have a second?
This is Randy. I'll second that.
And Randy Hutchinson as a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll go to a roll call vote. Begin with Ryan Braun.
Ryan, yes.
Paul Chase.
Yes.
David Earl, not there. Christopher Hogstrom. Randy Hutchinson.
Yes.
Emily Jansko.
Yes.
Aaron Johnson.
Yes.
Matt Clark.
Yes.
Mike Lauder.
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod.
Yes.
Darren Perry,
Yes.
Kristen Purdy,
Yes.
and Casey Snyder.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. You're making this easy on me. Thank you. We'll now go to our next agenda item. This is agenda item number 9, the management bison hunts, the 9 Mile Range Creek unit. Brad Crompton, the assistant wildlife manager of the Southeast region, presented this. Everyone had opportunity to watch this one as well. We did receive quite a few comments on this. We'll turn some time over to Ben that he can give us what our public input was on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had an even 50% in support of this proposal. Just under 42% were neutral, and a little over 8% were in opposition to this proposal.
Okay, thank you. Watching the clock, I would just wanted to respect to Aaron. How are you doing? Are you needing to leave us at this time, Aaron, or are you able to hang around a little bit?
I'll be here a little bit. I'll interrupt when I'm off. But
Thank
I'll
you.
send somebody a text and let you know that I signed off.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so again, I invite RAC members to, we did receive quite a few comments, and as respect to the public, let's maybe with some of our questions, you might recall some of the questions you received from the public on these, so we can help answer some of the questions. So with that, I'll turn the time over to RAC for questions that you might have for Brad.
This is Matt Clark. I have a question. So if this unit, it takes a 4-day float trip to get to, why can't the bison just be there? And it doesn't seem like there'd be a big economic impact if it takes 4 days on the river to get to this.
A good question. There's quite a few things going on at the same time in this. It's there's grazers that are impacted and private lands that are impacted, and public land management agencies that suddenly they're just a new species on the landscape that we can't account for. So we're trying to manage them to the best of our ability, and the objective right now is 0. So we're doing our best effort to get there.
And Brad, if I could add to that too, I would say that it is remote. The area is very remote, but it's also complicated. You can access it by vehicle at times of the year. So the river is the only point of access. Land and private in holdings back there, as well as public land grazers, and wildlife and public land grazing are completely compatible. When we've taken the time and have a management plan in place, and in this instance, there's not an appetite to pursue a management plan in this area because there are other things that we have to consider for bison there. So I think that's all part of it, Matt. It's not just inaccessible. It is accessible some times of the year and by some individuals. There are roads in there as well. Is that fair, Brad?
Yeah, well done.
So if I could follow up with that question, if somebody does harvest a bison in this area, are they going to be able to get it out?
Yeah, like Kobe said, there's certain times of the year where it's a little bit more accessible. People who boat the river, those bison are relatively close to the river, and for the most part, you got to be equipped to pack it out either on your back or on a horse if you're in Range Creek. But certainly possible. We've done some limited hunting in there the last several years with alternates from the Book Cliffs hunt, and people have been able to pack them out. And you have to know where you're gonna, know how far you can go with one on your back. That's for sure. And the most important thing we'll do if this is approved is educate people before they ever purchase the permit. The relative difficulty of this hunt, and the access issues.
So one final question, is this hunt open to people that have already drawn a bison tag?
Yes, it does include those people as well.
Matt, if you're done, I've got a question. I just was wondering if you, Brad, if you or Covey could expand on the comment that there's just not an appetite to create a bison plan down there. Why not? Clearly there's buffalo going into that, or bison going into that area.
Brad, you want to take the first stab at this, and then does that sound good? Is that okay?
Sure. I'd be delighted to. Yeah, we've had quite a few meetings about it with the BLM, with grazers and things like that. It's much easier said than done. It's quite a process to account for these additional animals. We have deer and elk herds that are below objective right now. We have a lot of issues going on, and just right now, the public sentiment. The Wildlife Board put together a Range Creek Bison committee a number of years ago, and yeah, the majority of that committee was against allowing for bison on the 9 Mile Range Creek unit. So we're just responding to that sentiment.
I'm sorry, Covey, were you going to say something?
I was just going to add to that a little bit. It's kind of complex land ownership. In areas where we have bison, we have large areas of public land. And as they come onto the Range Creek, they have the potential to come onto tracts of private land. And so in working with some of those private landowners and large ranches, there just hasn't been the appetite to expand that. They currently rely heavily on their private land for grazing of cattle and other things. And I mean, you never know, but right now there's not an appetite to expand bison into that area.
And then last quick question for you, Brad. In your video presentation, you're talking about the group that you got together to as part of your discussion, that there was not agreement on what needed to be done there. I'm under the impression it was mostly from the reservation. I think your comment was those people, that group, tend to view these as their animals. So is that the conflict? Is that what the is?
Good question. There's all kinds of moving parts in this. There is some resistance from the reservation. As far as they manage that bison herd, on reservation lands, and we have no control over how they do that. Most of the year, these bison are only off reservation lands for 4 or 5 months during the winter months. So that's the only time we can manage them. So there's resistance there, and also so the museum property in the middle of Range Creek itself, the additional harvest and just people in there, they manage that property to protect our archaeological resources. We need to respect, their management priorities, and so there's a little bit of resistance about the potential for a whole bunch more people in there. But that that permitting process is already in place. They have a way to allow hunters or visitors of any type to visit the canyon and take care of that. So yeah, that's where most of the resistance came from. I believe you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was. One last question. Sorry for taking so much time. What's the ultimate goal? Are you wanting no buffalo in there, or are you wanting to reduce the amount of buffalo in there?
The population objective, and since there is not a management plan, is 0, and so we're shooting to manage to that objective. This may occur. Just hunting pressure may just push them back to where they stay on reservation lands or increased harvest. But yeah, that's the goal.
Okay, thank you.
So if we were to approve this, is this for I don't remember, is this a one-time just this coming year, or will this stay in place in order to try to keep the numbers at 0, or how long would this be in place?
The primary thing that's being proposed are rule changes that would allow for an over-the-counter bison hunt. And we're asking for permission to have this hunt on the 9 Mile Range Creek unit this fall.
Okay, so
Justin,
some of the comments that I had. Yes, go ahead.
sorry, I just didn't know if you were moving on, so I can ask it whenever. It was sort of in the same line
You're
of
on.
questions. Okay. So I do have a question. So it looks like you're moving a once in a lifetime tag to an over the counter tag. Am I understanding that right?
Correct.
So two questions sort of as a follow-up. One, has that ever been done before for another once in a lifetime species? And two, if an individual purchases a once in a lifetime species tag over the counter, does that count as their once in a lifetime hunt?
Okay, the first question is, this is very similar to how we manage cow moose tags, where a bull moose is a once in a lifetime species. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kobe.
I'd say it's very similar to how we manage even bull moose on CWMUs. If you buy a CWMU bull moose tag, you can buy a bull moose tag annually and have the right to purchase that over the counter. Sorry, Brad, I didn't mean to hit in. I just wanted to add that.
No, perfect. The second part of your question is yes, you would lose when you purchase the tag. Yeah, you lose your bonus points and are no longer able to put in for bison on the Henry Mountains or the book list. However, you would be able to purchase this tag year in and year out. So you could conceivably purchase or harvest more than one bison on this unit.
So one final follow-up, if I can. I know you guys have been working on this. I'd actually rather see something get settled out maybe than hit an objective number of 0. But do you guys have done depredation tags in that general area, right? If I remember right. I mean, I Sand Wash, which is just upstream of Range Creek. You've done some depredation hunts in there. Same herd, and you're still dealing with the same problem. How confident are you that this is going to work?
We're just trying to do all we can. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't have management of these bison most of the year while they're on reservation lands. So yeah, it's doing all we can while we can to put pressure on them to harvest more and just do our part.
And Casey, to add to that too, a lot of times the depredation hunter pool is a great option. The issue is always that it's you're dealing with people with a lot of points a lot of times, risk, and we always take care of our hunters and do our best, but it a really clunky process. So when we need somebody in there, when we have bison in there on Wednesday, it might not be until the following Wednesday when we actually can get hunters in there, and it just is it's difficult. And as much as we've tried to streamline it, we can just see where us have the will and have the ability, if they could help us with this problem and give them this opportunity, it feels like a win.
On the same lines of Casey's question, so if I understand correctly, someone who has already drawn a bison permit on the Range Creek or on the Henry Mountains would be allowed, they would still be able to purchase one of these permits, correct?
That's correct.
So if I guess I know the purpose is we're trying to push we want 0. We're trying to push the buffalo off or the bison off of that unit. Did the division, or when coming up with this, how to work the plants and once in a lifetime, was it ever talked about that this perhaps wouldn't take a bonus point? Because it seems to me like if there is someone who already has multiple bonus points for a bison, they're going to be less apt to buy one of these permits. But if we're really trying to push them off, would you guys consider maybe not doing that, and perhaps, if successful, take the bonus points away?
We did consider all the different options when we did this. And what we came back to is that form and the way that we already do it with moose, again, is if you buy a moose tag and go and hunt moose on a CWMU under a permit that you've bought, The second you buy that permit, whether you're successful or not, you're excluded from the draw. And we understand that there are hunters with bison points, with high amounts of bison points, that will not be interested in this permit. And we encourage them to keep waiting, and we manage for bison on the Book Cliffs and on the Henrys, and they have the ability to put in and draw a permit and hunt there. Understand that there are individuals that are willing to take a chance, maybe don't have as many points, maybe they are putting in for other species. And so there are a lot of individuals that say would still be interested in this permit. So we went with the route that was easiest to administer and hopefully most effective. And also similar to what we're already doing.
Yeah, this is Art chiming in. I actually had a bookless bison tag last year, and I guess I see this more as something that either somebody with low points or who has already drawn a tag is going to participate in, and I support it from that perspective. I mean, there's going to be a limited number of people that are going to do this, and I think it's worth a try to see if it actually accomplishes their management goals.
And I guess I'm seeing it as, I guess I'm seeing it as someone who, first, I'm jealous that you drew that permit, Matt, but I'm seeing it as someone who hasn't drawn that permit. And so, you know, you'll have an opportunity to go out there again, and if you choose to do so, and kill two. And if it is a more or less a depredation type hunt, I would say I feel it's a little bit different than, say, a CWMU bull moose tag. And so I guess it's maybe more of a comment, but I'd like to maybe see something different happen with the bonus points. That's just my thoughts.
Chair?
Yes.
Just a question. What's the potential for hunter-Indian conflict? I've hunted close to reservation property before, and those people do feel like they are their animals. Has there ever been, or is there potential for that kind of a conflict?
In the field, no. You know, it's very remote area in that time of year. You know, not much interaction with tribal personnel that way. There's obviously some conflict in just how we view these animals. But yeah, in the field, I don't think hunters would ever come into contact. At the most, if you know, floating the river or something like that, perhaps they'd come in contact that way, but nowhere in range.
And
Any other
Justin,
questions?
Just to add one more thing to this, this is excluding you when you have one of these permits from the draw is not only just moose permits. This is how conservation permits are treated. This is how expo permits are treated. This is how we do it for once in a lifetime species all the way across. If you get an opportunity to hunt one of those species, you're excluded.
So basically, just like an expo permit or anything else, if you're fortunate enough to draw one, then also you're fortunate you get a chance to do it again, and just kind of how it is. I understand. Do we have any other questions about this? All right, without any questions, do we have any comments from the RAC?
I'll just throw out one quick comment. I understand the approach that's being taken. Just philosophically, I'm opposed to not creating an objective plan, not creating a plan to manage these animals. Instead, just hunt them to zero when they cross the river. So I have a problem with that.
Okay.
Hey, Chairman, this is Darren Perry of the Shoshone Nation.
Yes.
My 2 cents are, I'm against the plan, not for any of the points or anything like that. I'm just against completely eliminating them out of the area when they only reside there for not even most of the year. and they reside on reservation land most of the year. So it's almost like Wyoming when they issue all those over-the-counter elk permits because Deseret's bulls are going over in the middle of the winter on their land. So I'm against that too. So yeah, to eliminate a species because they show up there for a few months out of the year, I've got a problem with that, and I'll speak up for my native brothers and sisters out on the Ute Reservation. So that's all.
For those, that's Darren Perry, and he actually is our RAC member that represents the Shoshone, correct? Nation, Darren?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Any other comments?
Yeah, just a quick one. I think that this is done as a response to private property owners and depredation, basically, and really the inability to realistically manage that herd in as it migrates. I don't see this as something that they're just trying to eliminate the animals. It's just a response, I believe, to the pressures to be.
Well, and this isn't to be argumentative, but I will throw out there that the purpose of this is to get the animals to objective, and the objective is 0. That means to eliminate the animals across the river.
And if I could just clarify, our goal is not to eliminate bison on the Ute tribe, and those bison are perfectly fine to be there. Right now, the animals seem to be bursting at the seams, and they're coming off the tribe because they're bursting at the seams. And in working together, we haven't found a way to manage those bison so that the appropriate number is there and that they stay on the tribe. We know that hunters aren't going to be successful at harvesting all these bison. We hope they'll be successful in applying enough pressure that they don't continue to come across the river.
Okay, do we have any other comments from the RAC concerning the management bison hunts? If we have no other comments, I'd entertain a motion at this time.
This is MacLeod again. I mean, I would make a motion that we accept this presentation. I think the number of hunters are going to be relatively low, and I think it's worth giving them a chance if they are willing to take this on.
So Matt Clark makes a motion to accept the management plan as presented. Do I have a second? Kevin MacLeod as a second. Do we have any more discussion on the motion, or any discussion on the motion? All right, with no discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote at this time. Begin with Ryan Brown.
Ryan, yes.
Paul Chase.
Yes.
David Earl is not present. Chris Holmstrom.
Yes.
Is that a yes, Chris?
That's yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good night, baby. Love you.
Can I think we're getting some, someone loves Emily, I just heard. Is that what I heard? Let's go to Randy Hutchinson, please.
No.
We have a no from Randy. Okay. Emily, are you there?
Yes.
Your husband or someone loves you, I heard. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Aaron Johnson.
Sí, yes.
Sí. Okay, hablo español. Matt Clark.
Yes.
Mike Lauder.
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod.
Yeah.
Okay. Darren Perry.
No.
Okay. Kristen Purdy.
Yes.
And Casey Snyder.
Yes.
Yes, reluctant. Yes, I heard. Okay. So the motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to 2. 2 votes against were Randy Hutchinson and Darren Perry. I believe it's appropriate to state the reason for the no vote. Randy, would you go first, please? If you wish.
Just what I stated before. I'm on principle. I disagree with limiting killing animals just because they cross a boundary, and we could address this by having a management plan for them. We don't have a management plan, and we should.
Okay, thank you, Darren.
I stated mine a minute ago, but I mean, if the division has done everything they could to work with the Ute tribe, then I'm still opposed to it. But I just think there's other ways. So that's all.
Okay, thank you everyone for your votes. This time we'll now move forward to agenda item number 10. This is managing predatory wildlife species policy revisions. And Darren, this was presented by Darren. Now that the other RAC said it wrong so many times, like Darren Du Bois, and he's our game mammals program coordinator. Hopefully everyone had a chance to get to watch his presentation. We'll first go to Ben to hear the public input on this item, and then we'll open to some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had just over 58% in support of this proposal, 12.5% in opposition, and just a little over 29% neutral.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this time, again, I'll open up questions that we have for Darren. And again, I invite you to recall some of the public comments you received so that you might be able to help some of their voices be heard. Do we have any questions for Darren? Bueller? Okay, no questions?
I was hoping someone else would. I've talked way too much this program. I'm sorry. Darren, could you give me some background on House Bill 125? Did the division propose it, or where did it come from?
So that bill was started on the Hill. Can everybody hear me okay? I guess that's kind of a dumb question to ask, because then, yeah. So anyway, yeah, that is a bill that started on the Hill, and we did work closely with legislators on that bill. In some ways it codifies the policy that we had in place and re-emphasizes the authority of the director. I think the main concern was following some of the deer hunts and some of the conditions that we're seeing out there on the landscape last year, that the division is responsive when predators might be the cause of struggling populations. And so we did, the second part of that is, as Kobe pointed out earlier, we've got a lot of really good data now on deer and sheep as well. And so it really made sense to incorporate that into how we determine whether or not predation is limiting a population or not. And so we've done that as well.
Okay, and then just one, I saw this observation come up several times in public comment cards. If we were to go forward on something like this, I know there's at least a handful of states that when you have a valid big game permit or tag for a species, that you could opt to use that tag for a lesser animal, I guess so I'd call it. Was there consideration given to that?
Yeah, so the statute requires 4 things basically, and that's one of the 4 that we find an avenue to allow big game hunters to take predators on units that where predation is limiting the prey population. That's something that we would need to address when we do recommendations this summer. But what we've been talking about so far is it could be as easy as just shifting the starting date for harvest objective seasons earlier in the year, so they'd be open during the fall. And then if someone wanted to purchase a lion permit while to have in their pocket when they're out hunting deer or elk, they could do that. The other option would be to create some kind of new permit, and the process to do that would require us to recommend that to the legislature. So that'd be, maybe a couple of years out before we could do something like that. The date change is something we could do right away. So that is something that's required in the statute.
Okay, last question on it. There's no consideration of the division using cyanide traps, is there?
No, not at this time. I'm not even 100% sure on the background on that. I know there was some controversy in Idaho over some of that stuff, and so that'd be more of a question for Wildlife Services.
Is there anyone online that could say, because I know federal uses it?
Right, my understanding, and again, I don't think they're on, but my understanding talking to them is that they do still authorize use of those devices on private land for coyote control, but beyond that, I really don't know.
Yeah, Darren, this is Aaron. You're right. On private, they can use getter guns, but they can't on public.
Okay, thank you.
In case anybody's wondering, we do let our kids choose what color to paint their rooms. So I just thought that might be a question that comes up.
I don't believe you, Darren.
Yeah, you look really good in pink as well, just so you know.
That's dreamsicle orange.
Orange. That is definitely pink.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't mention, this is my room, by the way.
All right. So Darren, if a motion was made tonight, how might we be able to encourage the division to entertain the thought of using, similar to Idaho, your deer tag or your elk tag for, a lesser species? What is there anything that we could do tonight to perhaps encourage at least to look into that?
The RAC can always make recommendations to the board to explore it. I think probably just trying to think big picture. I think some sort of permit that you would, rather than using your deer tag to tag a lion, for example, I'd prefer that we still go through the regular process, whether that permit is cheaper or free or something like that. I think it'd be open for discussion, but I don't. These animals still have value, and so whether it's a full price permit or not, just given the likely success of a person doing a boot hunt, it's certainly something we could discuss.
And
hey, Darren, this is Aaron. Hey, this is Aaron. If I can make a comment, probably more than half the state is open to year-round lion hunting on a harvest objective. Anyone can buy a tag over the counter and kill a lion in those areas already. So we're actually arguing about something that can already be done if you just took time to read the proclamation, study the areas, and go out there.
Yeah, Aaron's right. The only real difference would be some folks are hesitant to buy a permit and only have a short time frame. For example, if you bought a permit in August, that hunt would end in November. So the only thing that shifting the season opener would do would make that permit good for a year, beginning at the beginning of those fall hunts, and then they can hunt through the winter if they wanted. They'd still have to use legal methods.
Personally, this is Aaron again. Personally, I don't think that this is going to have a huge impact on the lion and bear populations. It doesn't affect the other states. I know everyone claims that they see lions and bears every time they go hunting, but we've done some study, and the percentage of people that are turning in their lion and bear on a deer tag is well below 1%. My only concern would be, and once again, I'm not going to vote against this proposal, but it's still illegal in Utah to kill a kitten or a cub. So when that person has his scoped rifle up there and he looks across the canyon at that critter, I just hope he can tell what he's shooting.
I was just going to throw in there, I agree with Aaron. Very few people actually see lions and bears when they're out hunting. I know he gets out a ton. I get out tons, and rarely do I see him, but I do see him periodically. But if the point of this program is to reduce predators in certain areas, even if it's 1 or 2%, that's 1 or 2% that aren't going to be there otherwise. So I think it's something worth considering.
All right, we kind of morphed into. Go ahead,
Go
Darren.
ahead, Matt. Sorry. Well, I was just going to say, these guys are right. To rely on those spot and stalk hunts wouldn't yield the outcome we need. If we get into a predator management scenario, we need to be aggressive, and really the most effective way to remove and reduce population densities is with the use of hounds in most cases.
Hey, Darren, here's something to look at, and then I've got to get off the phone to go to work. But if the goal of the division is to reduce lion and bear numbers, one thing that they could do is work with the state of Utah, the Department of Professional Licensing, DOPL, and maybe make it legal for individuals to guide lion and bear hunters. As it stands right now, if I wanted to take Randy or Darren or anybody on the board lion hunting, to do that legally and charge money would cost me between $3,000 and $5,000 in permit fees and licenses and insurances. And something that the state never looks at is that, when someone buys this lion license and then they can't find a lion to kill with their binoculars, they're going to want to go have someone with hounds take them. And the way the rules are written, you put gas in that houndsman's truck, then he just became an unlicensed guide, and it's a felony. So there's a lot of things that need to be looked at in order to do that. And I don't know that the division or anybody wants to tackle those problems, but putting together maybe a working group on how to do it would probably be the best idea. I have to sign off. When the vote comes up, I vote for this plan.
Thanks, Aaron. We could look at that. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Aaron, for your input. Thank you very much. And, all right, do we have any other questions? Or we've kind of morphed into some comments as well. Is there any comments on this action item number 10? If none, I will entertain any motions at this time.
I'll make the motion, Jerry.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we accept this proposal as presented.
Okay, I think Kevin beat you to the motion, so I'm gonna put Kevin as making a motion to accept the plan as presented. How do you feel about a second, Matt?
I will second.
Okay, do we have any discussion on the motion? No discussion or questions. We'll go ahead at this time and vote. We'll begin with Ryan Brown.
Ryan, yes.
Paul Chase.
Yes.
David Earl is not present. Christopher Hogstrom. Okay. Randy Hutchinson.
Yes.
Emily Jensko.
Yes.
Aaron Johnson stated before, yes. I believe it's appropriate that I can do that. So put him as a yes. Matt Clark.
Yes.
Mike Lauder.
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
Darren Perry.
Yes.
Kristen Purdy.
Yes.
Thank you. And Casey Snyder.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. We will now move to our last item on the agenda. That is the Cougar and Bear Rule Amendments. This was also presented by Darren DuBois, the Game Mammals Program Coordinator. Once again, I hope everyone had a chance to watch his presentation. We'll now turn some time over to Ben to go over public input.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the item that was mentioned last night in the Central Region RAC, that there was a technical glitch on the public input portion of our online. So I think from what I understand, we found that out late last night right before the meeting in the Central Region began. And I also understand that that's been opened back up for public comment. If any members of the public wish to provide comment on that item, they can do so online. And we'll see what we can do to get that feedback incorporated into our presentation to the board for this item. Our apologies.
Or is it still appropriate, and are we able to vote on this item with that information? We are, correct?
We can, yes. It's hopefully if RAC members have feedback, we can hear from them, or if they've heard from any members of the public as well, we can hear what they've heard.
And maybe I could help too. This is largely a bookkeeping exercise. These changes were implemented through statute this session in House Bill 228, I believe it was. And so, the statute trumps our rule. So this is just a matter of making the rule jive with the new statute. And so that's the reason why we're recommending the changes, and hopefully that'll help with the discussion.
Darren, would it be appropriate? Is there anything that was maybe in opposition to it at all that you heard, or were there any concerns from public that were brought to your attention?
No, but again, if we don't change our rule, the statute still trumps. And so it really did two things. It changed the window during which a landowner can take action when a predator gets in and kills livestock from 72 hours to 96. So we just need to make sure that that was reflected in our rule as well. And the second thing that changed is it allows an opportunity for a producer to obtain a depredation permit for bears, similar to what people can currently do for lions. If they've got a particular lion that's hitting them chronically year after year, in this case a bear, the division could issue them permits. So those are really the only two changes. And again, that's in statute now. And so this is just making sure our rule aligns with the statute. But if we didn't pass it, the statute still trumps. So that would still be the law.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Darren at this time? Any comments? Okay, with that information, I think it's appropriate we could call time or entertain a motion by someone.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve what's been presented.
I have a motion from Ryan Braun to to approve, or I have a motion to approve the presentation as presented.
I would second that. This is Randy.
And a second by Randy Hutchinson. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, we'll go roll call for a vote at this time. Ryan Brown.
Ryan, yes.
Paul Chase.
Yes.
David Earl is not present. Christopher Holgstrom. Randy Hutchinson.
Yes.
Emily Jensko.
Yes.
Aaron Johnson is no longer part of the meeting. Matt Clark.
Yes.
Mike Lauder.
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod.
Yes.
Darren Perry.
Yes.
Kristen Purdy.
Yes.
And Casey Snyder.
Yes, that is whoever crafted that underlying law is just brilliant. I just want you to say that. So I appreciate whoever did that. It's just amazing.
I've said that many times myself.
Whoever it is, whatever's helped them sleep at night, we'll tell them that.
Very humble human being. No, thank you, Casey. Really, as a state legislator, we appreciate your work and what you're doing, and we understand that our Utah State Legislature has a big part of what we do. So it's nice to have someone who is involved on both sides of this of the equation. So we thank you for that. I want to thank everyone on the RAC. I have lost sleep over this meeting on how this might go, and I appreciate everyone's cooperation and comments.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just don't want to have everybody leave. We just need one point of clarification on Bucks and Bulls, where we were having technical difficulties. We had two people that were not able to vote. And on my notes, I don't know, do we put them down as abstain because they were unavailable? What are we putting down for that?
So I have David Earl that he was on. We weren't able to get a vote from him, and I do not believe we got a verbal on the phone from him. Who was the second person? Was it Casey at the time?
I'm not sure. That's the information I couldn't capture. That's the only thing I missed. And I don't know how to document that.
I think it was Casey, and he messaged me offline to ask that he vote yes on that item. He could hear us, but he couldn't unmute himself for that vote. Does that jive with what you're remembering too, Jody, on your side?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Jody, and thanks, Mike, for asking. We do want to make sure we get that stuff right.
So we'll put Casey, just to clarify, we'll put Casey as a yes on the Bucks and Bulls, and then we were not able to get a vote from David Earl. Do we consider that unanimous, or will we just go, because he was present but unable to get one?
Yeah, it was unanimous of those RAC members present.
Thank you.
Okay.
And we'll make sure we note in our motion summary that we'll work on immediately following this meeting that he was not participating in the meeting at the time the vote was taken.
I also want to thank our public for joining in. I'm curious is there a way of knowing the number? I'd be curious how many people logged in or off, but I hope that you felt your voices were heard and that you were able to participate. We'll hope that we'll be able to meet again. I'm forgetting protocol as far as to adjourn the meeting. Is there, if everyone is okay, we'll go ahead and close this meeting at this time. If I had my gavel, I'd hit it. Oh, sorry. I'm in a hurry. Would anyone like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting at this time?
I would motion we adjourn the meeting.
We have Randy Hutchinson, okay. And a second.
I will second that, Claire.
Do we need to vote then on this as well? No. One last vote for good time's sake. So we'll go ahead and start with Ryan Brown.
Ryan, yes.
Paul?
Yes.
David is not here. Chris? Randy Hutchinson?
Yes.
Randy Hutchinson? Emily?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Okay. Aaron Johnson is not here. Matt Clark?
Yes.
Mike Lauder?
Yes.
Kevin MacLeod?
Yes, and I just want to thank everybody for working so hard on this thing.
Darren Perry?
Yes.
Kristen Purdy?
No, just
No,
kidding. Yes.
you don't get to do that. I was waiting for that. And Casey Snyder?
Yes.
All right, thank you, everyone. And we'll be, just a reminder that the Wildlife Board meeting will follow similar protocol, and we'll invite everyone that will have a chance to watch that, and that'll take place on April 30th at 9 a.m. Thanks again for everyone's time, and good night.
We are clear of the YouTube.